It's time for On the Farm in Alabama, bringing farmers and agribusiness the latest news from Alabama Extension and the Auburn University College of Agriculture. Now here's your host, Alabama Extension Regional Agent, Eddie McGriff.
Good day. I'd like to welcome everybody today to On the Farm in Alabama, and today we're at Henderson Farms and we're talking with Chad Henderson and Stuart Sanderson. Henderson Farms is only one of the two growers in Alabama that have documented 100 plus bushel soybean yields. So when we're talking about making 100 bushel plus soybeans or really high yielding beans, there's three key elements that play a part in this. First is planting as early as we possibly can. Second is to have irrigation or adequate rainfall. And third is to have good sunlight at pod fill. Now, I was talking to a grower, Chad, up in Wisconsin. He planted his beans March the 24th. We got a lot of growers in Alabama that they really don't think you really need to plant soybeans until the end of April or May. But when would you like to plant your soybeans?
Early as possible. We want to plant them early as possible. We would like to, I was shooting for the first week of March this year, but it didn't happen.
Well, we were able to get them in April the 5th, and this is what I would call ultra early planted beans in Alabama. Anything that's planted in late March or through the middle of April. So we want to plant an indeterminate variety, and I know that you planted two indeterminate varieties when you were tried. What two indeterminate varieties did you?
We used the Agrego 5288 and a Pioneer 47A46.
Now you're on 15-inch rows.
Mm-hmm. We're on 15-inch rows.
And what plant population do you?
We dropped 105,000 on these. We wanted somewhere around 90 to 100 is what we wanted.
The other thing that we did and we're going to look at is Chad is set up on 15-inch rows, but he could only make an application in furrow on like you would be on 30-inch rows. So we only made an in furrow application on every other row. And what we did is we planted the soybeans that were treated with a fungicide, but we also added on every other row, which he was able to do, 4 ounces of pre-axer. And I think this is important when we're planting these ultra early beans or early beans to have a fungicide in to help get that bean off to a good start. So what we'll be doing in this series that we're calling the bean counters is we'll be following the crop all along to harvest, and Chad and Stuart will be talking about how they make these high yield beans. Now, Stuart, what kind of herbicide program did you use?
Well, there's a couple of different programs we use because we plant differently. We have conventional and we have no-till. Now, where these beans are planted, was in freshly tilled dirt, so you really didn't have any weed pressure out there. You didn't have anything lingering over from the winter like we would typically have in no-till situations. But one thing that we look at, if you want to talk about raising record-setting beans, whatever that number may be for you, it may be 80, 90, or for us, we like to be over 100. We want to limit the external pressures on that plant once Chad gets it up growing. And I think that's a key fundamental point in growing these high yield soybeans. When we come across and put herbicide on the bean plant, now it's Roundup resistant beans. It's resistant to dicamba. But from my standpoint, what does that actually mean? If we introduce a herbicide to a plant and it's resistant, is the plant resistant or is it just using energy that it has to fight off that chemical? So it's just like if we get a cold or something, our body's going to fight something off. Well, it takes energy away from our core to fight off something like that. So you want to try to limit as many herbicide applications as you can. Sometimes it's necessary to make multiple trips, but if you can start clean, when I say start clean, again, we may not be able to see the weeds out there now that may not be growing. So a lot of times we'll incorporate a dual and a metribuzin product. And what that does is that gives us a bigger window to hold back any weed pressure and let that bean get up and growing. And I think that's very important. If you can limit early weed pressure, you might be able to come back with a single application, whether it's straight Roundup or Roundup and Classic or Roundup and a dicamba mixture like Ingenia or something, you may be able to come back and only make one application. And, you know, I can't sit here and say from a scientific standpoint that one application of a dicamba beans will yield more than 2 applications of a dicamba, but I know that it's cheaper on the pocketbook. It's another trip that you don't have to go across the field. It's another herbicide that you're not having to introduce to tender foliage on the soybean, because we do not want anything to interfere with the photosynthesis of the plant. And so any kind of coating that you put on that plant, in my mind, is going to affect photosynthesis. Along with our herbicide program that we found over the last few years is we try to put a little bit of manganese in when we're going across the product with these products across beans. Now, we feel like that gives us a little bit of buffer. Now, you'll never understand what I'm talking about unless you go to a field and you put in your own strips and you run a buffer like a manganese in with a Roundup product and then run straight Roundup in the field. I guarantee you will see some slight difference in the color of those plants. Now, does that affect the yield? Well, you won't see it on a yield monitor. But in mine and Chad's mind, if it's noticeable to our eyes, it's going to be noticeable to the yield. So the biggest thing is limit the weeds early, take care of them early, and let the plant grow.
Well, the other thing that's important is what kind of a pre-plant fertilizer program did you use, Chad?
We use chicken litter.
Chicken litter. A lot of people are concerned about chicken litter, but we've seen some of our high yield growers use chicken litter. So you're usually using about how much chicken litter per acre?
2 ton.
2 tons.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be following Chad and Stuart as we go along. We'll be showing you the crop as we go along. We'll be sharing tips and ideas with these high yield growers that have made 100 bushel plus bushels of soybeans per acre. So follow us on the bean counters, and want to thank everybody for tuning in to On the Farm in Alabama, and especially want to thank Chad and Stuart for being with us today.